Thank you for joining me for a walk in the garden. I'm Liz Davey, and you're watching this show on NCTV. A Walk in the Garden is a show that's filmed about every 2 weeks in my garden in Norfolk. We learn what's growing, what's being harvested, what's being planted, and what chores need to be done in the garden. Right now I'm in my herb garden, where we usually start the show. And things have really come along here. Almost all the herbs are ready to pick. We have lots of mint of different types: spearmint, chocolate mint, orange mint, and another mint over there that's kind of a mixed citrus flavor mint, also apple mint. It does tend to go a little wild. I try to keep it contained, and I also pick it frequently for use. That's the thing with herbs. The more you pick, the more they grow. So keep picking and using them. Right now we have a couple of garlics up here, and I also have garlic down in the main garden, a whole row of it. But these are garlic scapes that it's forming on the top, and they will do that. And these are going to need to be cut off. But don't throw them away. For years I threw them away. And then I found out that they're useful. You can eat them. You can chop them in pieces and use them as you would garlic. They have a very light, nice garlic flavor. We'll probably do something with those in another week or so, but I will, in the meantime, snip them off. The reason you snip them off is you want the energy of the plant to go into the bulb, so you'll have nice garlic bulbs for storage, and you don't want it to go into the bloom, which is right here, which will bloom if we leave it on the plant. So those need to be snipped off, and you can save those and use them. We have plenty of sage that can be used now, all kinds of thyme, different varieties of lemon balm, of rosemary, oregano, and tarragon. And again, you want to keep snipping these. They're best before they go to seed. Next time we'll talk about how to save some of these for winter use. I also have lemon verbena, and I have one not only here, but over in my flower garden. It's a particular favorite of mine, and I really like to serve it and use it in the summer. It has a definite lemon flavor to it. It can be chopped and put in rice, used in cookies. Lots of uses for lemon balm. Tea is one of the other things that many people use it in. Mint is also used in tea. The rose geranium leaves are also edible, and they're often used in baked goods. Some of the non-edible herbs are the tansy and the rue and the southernwood. Those can be used for things like moth prevention, insect repellents, and that sort of thing. One of the nice things in bloom right now is this rose. This is an old rose. An apothecary rose, it's called. It's a very old variety. It withstood the winter a lot better than a lot of the modern roses did. The petals of this rose are extremely fragrant, and this one can be used for potpourri. And since I don't spray it, you can also candy the petals or use it in baked goods. There are recipes out there for things like rose petal jam and other things with rose petals in them, cakes and cookies with chopped rose petals. But again, this is a very, very fragrant rose, and it's in bloom one time in the summer. Once it has its bloom, it's gone. It's not a rebloomer. Only the modern roses are rebloomers. If you have aphids on your roses, and this can be a problem, and you don't want to use pesticides because you wish to use the petals to either decorate cakes or make something with them, a strong spray of water often is all that it needs to take care of aphids. That's true of almost anything. If you have aphids, which are those tiny little bugs that crawl up the buds. Right now I don't see any on this plant, but a strong spray of water is just what you need to dislodge them. Our chives are going to seed, and very soon you'll be able to finger them and seeds will come out in your hand, and you can scatter those around to reseed the chives or put them in a different spot and start a new clump of chives someplace else. Let's move on to the perennial garden. Right now in the perennial garden we have several things in bloom. Lilies are starting to bloom. If you were sure to get those red lily beetles off your lilies, you should have some very nice looking lilies. Roses here are blooming as well. Another hardy rose is the rugosa family of roses, and I have several of those, and they're extremely hardy. If you want hardy roses, the rugosas are pretty much carefree. Some of the new roses claim to be carefree, but some of the old ones are too. The columbine has finished with its seeding, and it is now finished with its blooming for the most part. It's now making seeds. I'll probably leave a few on and take a few off. This is a foxglove, and usually I have a lot of foxgloves around the garden. This year not so many. The winter was a little hard on the seedlings. This is a biennial, and a biennial flower is one that comes up one year, blooms the next year, and then dies. But they usually reseed themselves. I will not deadhead this one, though if I did, I probably could get a secondary bloom. Might get one anyway. But I will let this one reseed, and I will spread the seeds in places that I'd like some foxglove to come up next year. These, even though this one reseeds and it's a hot pink, it may reseed and its children may be pale pink, they may be white, they may be the dark pink, they may even be darker pink. You never know what you're going to get with this second seedlings. Salvia is also in bloom right now, and there's a nice honeybee right here on the salvia. I like to encourage the pollinators. They're good for my vegetable and fruit gardens too. Once this is finished with its bloom stalks, you want to cut them off at the base. And this one's not quite finished, but I'm going to cut it anyway. What this will do is force the plant to re-bloom, and you'll have blooms on your salvia all summer if you keep it deadheaded. Deadheading is cutting off old dead blooms. Basically, that's what it's called. I'll be doing the same thing with the Philippendia, the white flower that's just going out of bloom here, and also the lilies when they're finished. We're going to move along a little bit. Iris are finished. Those have been mostly the stalks removed, and this plant is in bloom, and again it will be cut down. Poppies they were in bud last time. They've bloomed. There's one bloom over on this side left and a few buds. Now, what do we do with the poppies? The seed heads are pretty nice in floral arrangements, and a lot of floral arrangers really like the poppy seed heads as an accent to floral arrangements. You can let them dry on the plant. I find they look a little ugly drying on the plant. I will probably let them dry a little bit longer and then pick them and put them in my garden shed in a container and let them finish drying there. Then I'll have them to use in fall arrangements. They look really quite nice in a fall arrangement, but I don't like the looks of them staying in the garden over the summer. By the way, this foliage will die down either completely or mostly after the poppy blooms. So you just have the seed heads sitting there, and they really don't add too much to a garden, though they are nice in arrangements. The daisies, these common daisies, have bloomed, and they've added some needed color to the garden. White is always a nice accent, but they're really floppy. And I've decided I don't like them. I will be cutting them back after bloom and then perhaps even removing them. There are shorter varieties, and I will replace several of these next year with a shorter variety. There's where that notebook comes in again. Write in what you want to replace next year. If you don't like it or it isn't doing well, it's time to just not deal with it anymore and find a good replacement. I know replacements exist for these, nice replacements, and so they won't be staying around very long. The rose that we cut way back in the spring because we had a lot of winter kill on it, this is one of the knockout roses, is setting a lot of buds. What came back is doing extremely well. This area had spring bulbs in it. They're going to seed. The seed pods are somewhat decorative for a while, but once the whole thing turns brown, this will be a big empty spot. Therefore, I found some annuals, and it's time to add annuals to the garden. This is a blue salvia, annual salvia, and as long as you keep them deadheaded after they've bloomed, they will throw out shoots for the rest of the summer. Annuals, it's time to add the annuals now. It's a little late to start planting perennials unless you really want to be conscious of taking good care of them and lots of water. Again, your annuals will need to be watered. The rest of my garden kind of does well on its own. I only water things that look really water starved. We try to save on water. We are on town water. There are restrictions. And again, as the summer goes on, we may need to talk about that a little further. This is a heliotrope. It's a lovely scented blue flower, and I've put several of those in the garden. It's theoretically an herb, but it needs more sun than my herb garden is getting right now. So I've put them over here so that I can enjoy them. It also has a very decorative bloom on it. It's just budded right now in blue. I'm going to move back here. Here's another one of the daisies that's going to go. The herbaceous peonies are now in bloom. And this one's a pretty one. It's about its third year in the garden. It's said with perennials, the first year you plant them, they sleep. The second year they're in the garden, they creep. But the third year, they leap. And that's when you'll start to get the true size and bloom of the perennial. So don't expect miracles the first 2 years. Just have a little patience and things will take off. I have another lemon verbena over here. Again, I have some foliage from the daffodils in this area, and the rhubarb is starting to do its wilting thing because it's a hot day today. It's about 90 degrees. It'll perk up tonight, but eventually it will be gone. So what I've done here is I had a bird bath and the top broke. So what do you do with the base? Most people, I suppose, throw them away, but I decided it must have a use. So what I did is I used a mallet to drive in a piece of aluminum tubing. It's not tubing, but aluminum rod. And this is a hanging basket without the hangers. And what I'm going to do is find the middle of the bottom here and set that right on the aluminum rod. And it will come right up through the plant, and that's fine. The first year I did this, I just set it on top, and we had a nice strong wind, and the whole thing fell off and broke the plant. But this way you can rotate it to get sun in different areas, and when the wind blows, it may shift a little, but it won't blow away. This is an annual verbena, which tends to do very well, and an annual petunia, which should spread out. We'll keep it fertilized and watered and have a nice tall arrangement here once the other things in this garden stop blooming. These are alliums, which are of the onion family. I have several different kinds of these. Some of them have already bloomed. This is a white one. If you do buy the bulbs for these, they go in the fall. And be sure not to buy ones that say naturalizes freely. Naturalizes freely is a euphemism for spreads wildly. And if you don't want it all over your garden, kind of avoid some of those things that naturalize freely. It means that the seeds will be all over. We have some other things in bloom, more peonies, more roses, more geraniums, all along the rest of the garden. The lady's mantle is the pale green or yellow-green blossom. It has an interesting leaf, and the flowers are very nice as fillers in floral arrangements. Another poppy has gone to seed. That one will possibly rebloom if I take the tops off. That's called Patty's Plum, and it's a plum-colored poppy. It is finished for this part of the season, but we may get one or two reblooms from it. Now it's time to move over to the vegetable garden. I'm in the vegetable garden at this time, and we have several things that need harvesting. Several things are almost finished with their season. One of them is the radishes. I've been pulling radishes, and we're getting a little space here to plant something else. But the radishes are starting to show signs of going to seed. So you want to get them out as soon as you can and use them. And it's time to plant more. I have a little spot right here that didn't have anything in it, so I'll just plant a few more radish seeds. When you plant a second crop when it's so hot, particularly, and I'll just plant a few now, you don't use too many of them, you can plant them a little deeper than you did when it was cooler. And then we'll want to keep these moist. A little help, unless Mother Nature provides the rain. And we'll have more radishes. The next thing is the arugula, and that too is showing signs of going to seed. For a while I just picked the seed heads off and hope I get more leaves. But again, it needs to be picked pretty much right away. And you can just pick off the leaves. And it's, if you like arugula, it's tasty. I will also, in the next week or so, be planting more arugula so I can have a continuous crop. It really likes the cooler weather, so I'll probably pick a side of the garden where there's a little more shade some of the day and see if I can get a little more so I can have a continuous crop. The scallions are ready to pick. They're on the other side of the peas. The peas are in blossom. Depending on the weather, how much peas we will get. They like cooler weather. We got them in a little late this year, so we may not get too many. Other things are growing well. We have lots of cilantro. That too is looking like it might want to go to seed. So we'll want to start harvesting that, using it or preserving it. I use it for pesto. We're going to make some of that later today. Makes an interesting pesto. It's great for Mexican food. You can also freeze it, but it will not in water, but it will not keep its texture. So you can use it for flavor. I prefer a pesto with the cilantro. It doesn't dry particularly well either. I believe there are some commercially dried products, but home drying doesn't work as well as making a pesto with it. We have lots of lettuce. Every year when the seed catalogs come out, I'm very hungry for homegrown lettuce. Therefore, we have Boston lettuce, we have red lettuce, we have plenty of green lettuce, we have some romaine lettuce that's coming, and we have a product called mesclun. And mesclun comes in a package that has two sections. One is lettuce, and these are cut and come again lettuces. Now, most lettuce can be cut and come again. It means you cut it, and then you take off the outer leaves, and it keeps growing. And then these are the bitter greens that are with it. There's some mustard in there, there's a little more arugula, some other greens that can add some sharpness and flavor to a salad. We particularly like them. Again, more lettuce. We have speckled lettuce, red and green lettuce. I love to make salads, and we have a salad almost every day in the summer. Not so much in the winter. The strawberries are ready to be picked, or should be. I've been picking a few. However, we have a little problem with the strawberry patch this year. It's getting old. The strawberries need to be redone and reseeded. I'll get a few berries, but we won't have nearly the crop that a new patch would give us. The other problem I'm having with them is chipmunks. And that's something that really you can't do a whole lot about unless you put out some mouse traps, which we have done at times, in order to catch them. I have put some wooden snakes in the garden, They seem to discourage them about as well as anything. I don't know if you can see the wooden snake. They're kind of realistic looking. They're kind of green and wooden. I've got a couple of those in here. And of course the nets help a little in the middle, but they still manage to get under the nets and get in a little bit. This net needs a rearranging. But the plants are getting kind of spread out. They just aren't as productive. Okay, I'm going to move over. We planted the cucumbers and they came up. You'll notice I've got the beds all mulched with straw. It doesn't eliminate weeding, but it certainly helps. Now we just mainly have the rows to worry about instead of the whole garden. It kind of cuts it down to size. What I want to do is put up some strings so that when the cucumbers start climbing, and with this warmer weather, they should start doing so fairly soon. I had the teepee up, planted the cucumbers around the base of it. Now I'm going to go around the base. Put in a low string. And I'll tie that up over here. I'm going to tie this string back to it. Then I'll come up and around the top of the teepee, back down around the string. Keeping it not too tight. They will find it. The idea is to have a string about every 6 inches. Or so. Depends where your plants are. And move on to the back. Loose end here. We'll continue in this fashion until we've completely covered the teepee, and then our cucumbers can climb up it, and our cucumbers will actually hang, so they won't sit on the ground and get the yellow spots that they sometimes get if they lay on the ground. Getting an extra piece here. Well, we'll just continue in this fashion around the other way too, until we've got all the way around, and we'll tie it off and then wait for them to grow. Our squash has also come up. I believe we planted that 2 weeks ago. And we have butternut, or butter squash, yellow squash, and zucchini in this area. I did plant a few bush butternut squash over between the peas and the spinach. They will, hopefully, the spinach and peas will be gone by the time they spread out and become larger. But one of the things I did last year that seemed quite effective in keeping the bugs off the squash was to put aluminum foil around the base of them. First thing I'm going to do is top dress them with a little organic fertilizer just around the edge. Maybe scuff it in a little bit. I will also be top dressing some of the other things, the beans and the flowers and the squash and possibly some of the perpetual spinach and the cauliflower and broccoli, as well as a few of my perennials. And I'm just going to cut sheets of aluminum foil and snug it in around the base of these. I read that the flies that form the eggs that hatch into the caterpillars or worms that get into the stalks of the squash and cause it to flop don't care for aluminum foil. It kind of disorients them. It looks a little strange in the garden, but it seemed to help last year. And we got a longer harvest. So I'll do this with each of the plants in turn and possibly put a few rocks on the corners to hold it down. And then when I'm all done, I'll cover the whole patch with a piece of this cloth, which will also help keep the moths off the squash. And hopefully we can get a good harvest. This I'll let float for the most part. I'll just fasten it in a few places because this squash will get fairly tall and we want it to float with the squash. Over here I have a rain gauge. And the garden needs about 1 inch of water per week to thrive. Hopefully we get it from Mother Nature. So far so good. We've gotten it. But in the event that we don't, some supplementary watering will be necessary for some plants. Again, in Norfolk, if you're on town water, you can't go wild with the water. You're limited to a handheld hose and on odd or even days of the week, depending on your house number. So you have to really do a good soak on the days that you can water. There's generally no watering on weekends, and there are other restrictions as well. You will get a notice in the mail, I'm sure, we always do. But the restrictions are in effect now. We need the water for our use in drinking and cooking, so we need to be careful with what we use outside. We'll talk again later about ways that you can conserve water and have it to use in your garden. Now let's go to the potting bench and repot a plant. This is a plant I've had in the house for some time. It's actually a coriander plant, which is an herb. I had a little herb label in it, which I'll save. But it's looking pretty nasty. It needs to be repotted. You can see I have some definite dead areas, but I also have some live areas. So I'm going to shake this out of the pot and put it up here, and then we'll go to work on it. And I think I'll put on my gloves. You can see it has a lot of roots. What we want to do is break it apart, and this could get messy. We could use the trowel or even a knife to get in here. And break off pieces. There we have one piece. And you can see there's some good stuff and some bad stuff. And we're going to remove that that's bad and throw it away and take out some of the good ones. Any house plants can be repotted now. A rule of thumb for repotting many of the house plants is to use a pot that's no more than 2 inches larger than the one it was in. Sometimes they get stressed if the pot is too large and will not grow well. Again, we can use the clippers on some of these roots. I'm not going to do the whole job here today, but you get the idea. To be doing it a little later. Here's a nice piece. And my plan is to make 2 plants, new plants, with the good parts of this one. And we'll cut off any dead leaves as well. But all this old dead stuff will be coming out. Give it some space. These can sit on the patio for the summer and then come in for the winter. It's been done pretty well in the winter, except we do get these dead pieces on it that are rather unsightly. You have to have some full sun for it. Again, I can use the clippers or scissors to cut these off. I'll probably put about 3 clumps of this size into each pot, along with potting soil. Give it a little water, possibly a little fertilizer later on, not right away. It needs some time to settle into the pot. I'll leave it in the shade for a few days once I get them potted up, to acclimate to the pot, and then I can gradually move it into full sun. Again, you don't want to tackle this inside the house. There's 1 clump ready to be replanted, and we'll probably put about 3 clumps like this into each pot and divide them a bit as we go. Again, just hacking it apart. And once I get my 3 clumps out, the rest will go in the compost. There's just no reason to save it at that point. But you can see a large plant is difficult to break apart. And getting out even small pieces is sometimes a challenge. This has a lot of deep roots and a lot of dead spaces. Most houseplants are easier than this to do, but I have confidence that this one will survive. There's another clump we can clean up. A couple more of these. Again, taking out any stems that are bad and trimming off the others and spreading them out. And we'll soon have a nice looking new plant. Now let's go back to the shade garden. I have a lot of rhododendrons in the shade garden, and they have finished blooming for the year. and you are stuck with these ratty blooms, which you can deadhead. I don't do all of them. I do the ones that you can see. They will eventually just fall off on their own. But if you want the garden to look nice and you have the time, or want to make the time, you can actually deadhead the blooms. And you just reach in with your thumb and forefinger and pop it out of the center. You'll notice that there are buds for next year's growth right alongside of it. If you want to limit the growth of your rhododendrons, pinch off some of the larger ones. Again, that will limit the height. This is also the season to trim back your rhododendrons if you plan to do so, and this will help you not ruin your next year's bloom. But I like to deadhead some of them at least, and then they just look a little nicer. It's not essential, but it's just something you can do to keep the garden neat. Again, the back of this bush will not get deadheaded, nor will those I can't reach. I don't do ladders, and especially on uneven ground, so just the front edges will get done on this one. Shorter ones will get better treatment, and I may decide to take some of the top off. This one's getting really large, and I have a pole pruner that I can use to take some of the top off if I decide to do so. Now let's go back a little bit further into the shade garden. You can also add a few potted things to the shade garden. If you have house plants that normally take shade, the shade garden is the place they should overwinter. We have a couple of logs and tree stumps, and I've added a few planters to them. This one has coleus. Again, I have to treat it for slugs. The slugs will climb right up the tree stump, but it's not as bad as if you put them in the ground. I have lost most of the coleus I've put in the ground to slug damage. So putting it in a container seems to help quite a bit. In order to keep it on the stump, I've driven a large spike into the center of the stump, and I put the pot right over that, again, so it won't move too far. At least it won't fall off and dump. A lot of the hostas are getting pretty big. Again, we'll watch them. Seeing any slug damage, I'll put more slug material out. Usually when they get to be this size, it is not much of a problem anymore unless we have a prolonged period of hot, damp weather. There are a few bulbs in the center. They are going to seed, are maturing and forming their own seeds below. The bulbs are expanding. Those will come out as soon as they're finished, and I'm thinking about what I want to use to replace that area. I may just put a decorative item in there for now. You'll notice that there are a lot of spots in my walk that have been filled with mulch, and that's because chipmunks have been digging there. We have a plague of chipmunks this year, and they have been going after the crocus bulbs. I used to be very concerned about this, but usually they leave quite a few, and they tend to take them somewhere else, bury them, and forget about them. So we have crocuses coming up in the spring in places we didn't even know we had planted them. So I let the chipmunks do their thing for the most part, and the dog at least enjoys chasing them. Now I'll go back to my sun shed, which is a little greenhouse. At the end of my path I have what's called a sun shed. We put this up a number of years ago. As you can see, it has one window that is plexiglass. This is a great place to start plants in the summer, and also to put the seedlings before you plant them outside. I also use it as a workshop and a storage area. I've already planted some cabbage last week, and it came up very quickly. This is the colored cabbage that you see in the stores for fall decoration, and I'm hopeful that when this matures we can keep the insect damage to a minimum so that we'll have some very showy fall decorations. in the fall. They're more like a kale cabbage type thing, and they usually are red or white and green. And they can be very nice in pots or added to the perennial garden for some fall interest. But you need to start them now in order to get them to that stage, and you need to give them a lot of care and fertilizer in order to get them there. I haven't decided yet whether I'll stick them in the garden or put them in pots. I may put them in pots this year so that I can keep an eye on them a little closer and keep the insect damage down. But it's been a very nice thing to have, and it supplements my indoor planting space. This is my favorite spot for a summer day. And it's a good place to rest and read. Usually my dog's right beside me, and we listen to the waterfall in the pond, watch the frogs. There's usually a few around. Watch them catch bugs, watch the fish, and just enjoy sitting in the shade garden. I'm not a sun worshiper, so this is a great place to enjoy your morning coffee too, and I usually do. Now it's time to go up to the patio and do a little cooking. Okay, we're going to do some cooking with some of the things from the garden. And the first thing I'm going to do is a very simple appetizer. And it's kind of a seasonal thing. And what I'm going to do is spread some bread. And this is party rye or dark rye bread. We're going to spread that with butter. Just a nice coating of butter. I use a non-salted butter. I'm going to put just a nice coating on. Again, you have to have all the elements of this to make it work correctly. The rye bread, the butter. This is still a little fresh from the refrigerator. There, we've buttered the bread. Now we're going to add sliced radishes. I've very thinly sliced the radishes. And I'll add those to these little hors d'oeuvres. Incidentally, I have a guest for supper tonight, and you're watching what they're going to be eating. Again, you can arrange them however you wish, but you just want a nice layer of radishes on the butter. Got a few little ones just to put on the plate. And the next thing is some coarse salt, kosher salt. The kosher salt on the radishes brings out their sweet flavor. And the combination of butter, radishes, rye bread is delicious. And there we have our quick appetizer. And something great to do with your garden radishes. Those came from the garden. The next thing I want to do is make some salads. And for this I'm going to use the arugula. And again, I picked and washed this. And we're going to put some on each of 3 plates, since I have one guest. We like it as a salad very much. Make a bed of arugula. And I'm going to add some roasted beets. These did not grow in the garden. My beets are not ready yet. They're ready for thinning, but not for serving. But we'll add a few. They've been roasted and then skinned. You cut off the tops and bottom and roast them in foil. And I use a little seasoning with them. And then I'm going to add feta cheese, a sprinkle of that on each salad. Just kind of broken that up. You could also use blue cheese in this salad. It works just as well if you prefer that. And finally, I'll sprinkle it with toasted walnuts. Just before serving, we'll add a few drizzles of vinaigrette dressing, and the dressing is basically oil and vinegar, and I've used some just seasoning with it, herbal seasoning. Now, one more thing to go, two more things really, and we're going to make some pesto with the cilantro and some parsley. The parsley from last year is just about ready to go to seed, so we want to use what's there before it does so. I'm going to put 2 cloves of garlic in the processor, and we'll process that a little bit. Just to chop it a little bit. And then I'll add the rest of the ingredients, which would be the parsley. Now we'll add a cup of cilantro. We've got a cup of parsley and a cup of cilantro in with our garlic. Then we're going to add 1/3 cup of Parmesan cheese and 1/2 cup of walnuts. Pesto is generally made with an herb. You don't have to use basil. Some sort of nut or pine nuts are traditional in basil pesto. A cheese, Parmesan often, and then oil, and we have olive oil to add. The old-fashioned way of doing this is in a mortar and pestle. I'm doing it, however, the new-fashioned way with the food processor. You could use a blender just as well. And we're going to blend this all together. Until everything's chopped into a paste. And I'll open it at least once and scrape it down. And continue to chop and blend. We probably need to also take it down from the sides one more time. This is a pretty spicy blend of cilantro. If you don't like cilantro, it's not something you'd want to have, but if you do like it, it's a tasty pizza. Okay, that should be about enough. Everything has been really chopped quite a bit. I'm going to spread this on a pre-baked pizza crust. This is a whole wheat crust. I made this one, but you could use a purchased pre-made pizza crust just as easily, or make one from refrigerated bread dough, your choice. We'll put this on. This is in place of the usual tomato sauce. It's also good with the basil pesto. We'll spread it around. You don't need too thick a coat of this because it's fairly rich with the walnuts and the olive oil. And spicy with the garlic and the herbs. And spread it around. Then we'll add some toppings. We're going to add some tomato. These are just chopped tomatoes. I would normally add some grilled chicken that's been grilled and then cut up. However, my guest is vegetarian, so we will not be adding any chicken until perhaps those of us who are not vegetarian consume it. We'll have it on the side. Trying to get the tomatoes and not the juice. Okay. I'm going to sprinkle it with some ripe olives. Again, if you don't like ripe olives, you can leave those off. It's kind of your own thing from now on. And then the cheese. And this is a mixture half and half of cheddar and mozzarella. We're going to put this in the refrigerator for a little while. And then when it's time to eat, we'll pop it into a 450-degree oven for about 6 minutes. Everything on there, nothing needs to be really cooked. It just needs to be heated and the cheese melted. So it doesn't take very long to finally get it on the table. It's a good make-ahead dish. The last thing we have for our meal are some cookies that I baked, and I baked these using mint from the garden. I made pineapple mint, I call them pineapple mint lilies. They're kind of a lily shape. Basically, it's a round cookie that's been folded in over the filling. And it was a butter cookie recipe. I cut rounds and then folded it in around the pineapple mint filling. The pineapple filling is made with a can of crushed pineapple and its juice, a little cornstarch, and that is cooked, and then the mint is added when it thickens. And that's all there is to it. And we've garnished that with one of the beautiful roses from the garden, and we have our meal for tonight. Thank you for joining me today for A Walk in the Garden. I'm Liz Davey, and this is NCTV, A Walk in the Garden.